Hello everyone. Welcome to Software Testing Expert Talk series. Today we have a guest who has already been part of our STET series earlier. He loved our concept and came back again to demonstrate API testing capabilities of his product named as Scriptworks. Guys, I want to let you know about Scriptworks again. It's a visual programming or low code based automation tool available in the market. Hi Duncan, we are happy to have you again on our show.
Hi Ajay, great to be back. Excellent. Looking forward to this one.
Guys, today Duncan is going to explain us how Scriptworks deals with API testing for REST-based APIs, SOAP-based APIs, and GraphQL-based APIs. Agenda for our today's STET is prerequisite for learning API testing, automation of GraphQL APIs using Scriptworks, automation of REST APIs using Scriptworks, API authorization in Scriptworks, and automation of SOAP-based APIs using Scriptworks. Over to you, Duncan.
Okay, brilliant. Let's share my screen.
Please go ahead.
And here we are. Okay. Excellent. Thanks. Thanks a lot for having us back again, Ajay. Really excited about this one. It's some recent developments we've been putting together in the Scriptworks platform, specifically around API testing. And the topics, as you mentioned today, that we'd like to cover are GraphQL specifically, APIs, and move on to REST and SOAP and some of the sort of areas around all of that. So things like authentication, parameterizing your body payloads, all that kind of good stuff. So we'll take it step by step. First section we're going to cover today is GraphQL. As you and your audience are probably aware, GraphQL is kind of up on the rise as a alternative to REST APIs, whereby you can create queries that will return data structures in JSON. And those queries, you can tailor the returned result, so the response that comes back is in the structure that you want. So it's quite an exciting technology, and obviously we need to be testing that. So first thing we'll do is we're going to look at a GraphQL demo website, which I've got my little crib sheet here on the left, but this is countries.trevorblades.com, and it's a sample website where you can pull out country data. Let me just switch back to that. Pull out country data, information on languages, capital cities, all that kind of good stuff. And this is a nice interface that they've got over the top of the GraphQL API, where we can put in our queries, so we can change the data structure for that, run that GraphQL query, and what's returned is a structure that we want to see. So how do we go about testing that using the Scriptworks API? So let's just copy the URL for that one. And what we'll do is we'll create a new test. So we'll call this GraphQL test 1. Oops, GraphQL test 1. And we'll save that and enter our visual programming canvas. So this is where we start to build up our API tests. What I'm going to do is drag in the first of the blocks. So this is how we define our tests within Scriptworks. And all tests generally have a wrapper. In this case, we're not using WebDriver as well. So we can also do web, mobile, desktop testing using WebDriver. In this case, it's just an API test. So we're going to drag that in. The next thing we'll do is go to our web services section, and in here we've got the different API types that we support, and these again have wrapper blocks corresponding to each type. So in this case we'll drag in a GraphQL call. Next thing we're going to do is add some properties to that call. So these properties allow us to specify things like headers, body content, query parameters, all that kind of good stuff that we'd want to do with our API testing. So in this case, we're going to drag in a URI. So this is our URI, countries.trevorblades.com. Next thing we want to add to that is our query. So here's our GraphQL query block. We'll drag that in as our next block in the list. And then
Mhm.
we're going to put in an input value. In this case, we're going to show a nice multi-line query that we're going to copy from the website that we're working with. So let's take our playground set area on that website, and we're going to put in this case, we're going to pick, let's pick AT as our country code. Just check what that gives us, and that returns Austria, as we'd expect. So we'll copy that. We'll go to our multi-line edit here, and we'll put in our GraphQL query. So that's what that looks like in our GraphQL query block.
Okay.
Right. So that's the query set up. Next thing we want to do is invoke the web service and get the response back. So we go back to our web services blocks, and here we've got the response section, and we can pull back just the response body or all the response information that we might want to validate, like status codes, messages, that kind of thing. So we're going to get the full response, and that's our query ready and complete. What we need to do, obviously, is we want to validate the content that's come back. So we're going to validate the name that's returned. But before we do that, let's just run that query and take a look at the response. So this is our results down here. So we drag this up, open up, and you can see here the request and the information. In this case, our GraphQL query that we've sent through. We've sent no query variables in this case, but down here, whoops, is the response that we get back. So there's our response body. So let's do some validation to confirm that the name that was returned here is what we expected. How do we go about doing that? So the way that we do that is using an assertion. So in this case, we're going to use an equal to assertion. We're going to drag that into our test here. And we're going to extract the information that we need from that response body. So in this case, we don't need the full structure. We just need this one value, which is Austria in this case. So we'll go to our JSON and XML, and we're going to extract a key value. So we can drag this in as our actual. And the key that we want here is data.country.name. So we just type that in. So this is JSON path. Which you'll find documented fairly well online. Where are we going to get that, extract that from? Well, we want to extract it from the body of the response that's been returned. So we go back in here, look at our response body, and we'll drag that in that case. And then in here, we just type in our expected value, which is Austria. So that's how we've applied an assertion, a test, to the content that's been returned by that query. So if we run that, what we should see now is there is our assertion being reported, and it's telling us that Austria obviously is, as we expected, the returned value from that particular value in our response. So that's a simple, straightforward GraphQL query and validation.
Quite simple. Yeah.
Pretty straightforward stuff. Yeah. So obviously we might want to do additional validations in this case. So we might want to add in multiple assertions to pick out further information from that particular response. So let's make a quick change here. Let's validate another country. So what I'm gonna do is expand upon this test and add some additional assertion steps, including quite a cool one, which we'll see in a minute, which is the validation of the flag that's returned is an emoji in this instance. So we're going to use Australia as our country of choice, and we'll just change that to be Australia. So to add new assertions here, we can, rather than having to drag them in again, what we can do is also duplicate an existing one that we have, drop that in, and we're going to validate, let's do a number of different things from here. So let's pick out, in Australia, we're going to just quickly amend our query, and we're going to pull out as well as the name. We'll get the capital city. We'll get the phone code for Australia. And lastly, the emoji of the flag that we're going to pull back as well. So save that. And then in here, we're going to say, okay, well, let's validate the capital. It's a test for you. Do you know what the capital of Australia is?
Yeah.
Do you know your geography?
Canberra. Yeah.
Canberra. There we go. Not everyone gets that one, actually. It's a lot of people still say Sydney. So let's put in a phone number. In this case, 61. And lastly is the emoji. Now, I don't have an emoji keyboard on here, but what we'll do is we'll do a little trick in a minute to do the validation for that emoji. So let's save that, run the test. And what we're seeing is a fail because our expected naturals aren't matching in that particular instance. So let's go in here and we can copy the emoji. You can see the little flag emoji there.
Yeah, I can see that.
Excellent. So we'll pop that in. Just going to remove the quote marks from around that. And just make sure we've got everything. Yep, excellent. So we'll save that, rerun it. Oh, we got a fail. Oh, no, what we forgot to do there is we forgot to amend our query. So this is also probably quite a nice thing to highlight at this stage, that when we get a fail on an assertion, you can see here that it's saying it's expected our flag value, and it's actually found the actual value of Australia because we still had name here in our extract field. So this is how it highlights our failures. It shows you what wasn't in there and what was actually presented as green in this instance. So let's amend that and make that emoji and run that again. And now what we're seeing here is it's telling us that, yep, that was the right value and all the other values passed as well. So that's a way of showing how we can validate multiple returned values and the exact values in one GraphQL call.
Wow, quite impressive. I've never seen like emojis can also be validated. Wow.
Yeah, I don't think any of our competitors, although people could correct me if I'm wrong, could support the Unicode character set that's required to display emojis like this. And you know, a lot of applications these days, it's quite important to test that kind of stuff.
Right.
Excellent. Okay, well, obviously we've extracted some single values here from the returned response, but what if we've got a vast amount of data coming back in this case? So let's just save this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our list of tests and we're going to duplicate that test. We've got a clone feature here, and we'll just edit that and call that test 2. And in this instance, you'll see it's the same test that we had, except we're going to change the GraphQL query now to one that returns a large volume of data. In this case, we're going to return all the languages for every country in the world. So what I'm going to do is just delete these assertions because these will be meaningless when we come to do that. And we're going to amend this query now to a query that returns all the languages. So that's this one here, which I've got on my crib sheet. So go back into the editor. And this case, we're going to return all languages for the world, the code, the name, and the name of the language in its native tongue. So let's save that. This is just the basic call, so we'll do the validation step in a minute. And what you'll see when we have a look at our response, I'll just drag this up because there's a lot of data here, is we've now got a huge amount of data being returned. And all these different languages that have come back. So rather than trying to construct our expected response in a text field, which is what we're going to do, we're going to do it in a file. So this is a technique that we save what we return, get returned from our API call, and then we use that as a baseline. So we can check that manually, make sure that it looks like we expect, and then we can use that as our expected result for all future calls. Okay. So how do we do that in Scriptworks? Well, first thing is we're going to go to the file handling section, and we're going to save the body content. So we'll go back and get our response body, and we're going to save it to a file. Again, I've got a demo file location, so rather than try and remember that, I'll copy that one in here as well. So this is my documents folder, and I'm going to call this expected response.json. Okay, so I save that. So you know that what we've done here, this is the folder on my Mac, and when we run this, what we should see now is our expected response.json file has been created. So we can open that. Let's open it up in Sublime Text. And in here, we've got all the content of that particular query. So as we saw from our logs. And what we can do now is we can rename that. We've validated that manually, and we can, let's not rename it. It is our expected response. So let's just use that as our expected response now. So we'll bring in another validation. Again, same assertion. Assert the value of our response body. And in this case, we're going to load this file. So we don't want to save it again. We'll delete that. Go back into file handling, and we'll say load data from expected response. And that's it. So what we've done there, just to recap, is we've created a GraphQL query, returned a lot of data. We've saved that response as a one-off step. And we're now going to use that file as our expected values. Okay, so hopefully if we run this, yep, we can see that that's passed, and we can see our expected and actuals here. Obviously quite a lot of information here in the expected and actual comparison. But yeah, so that's how we would, rather than picking out and teasing out individual bits of information, how we can validate our full body that's returned in that case.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Superb.
Excellent. So that's really kind of a very quick rundown of how we can test GraphQL APIs and a couple of different varieties there. Simple single node validation, multiple node validation. We can also, as we'll look at a little bit later on, validate things like response codes, all of the stuff that we get back here. So we can see response headers, the status message, all of that kind of stuff as well. We can perform validation on quite straightforward. Very, very simple example in this particular case would be if we say let's do a test equal to, and we'll get the response status code in this case, and we can say is that equal to 200. So if we run that.
Okay. By this way, we can validate status codes from response.
Yes, absolutely. So obviously, one of the things that we'd want to do is look at status codes that are being returned by our API. So 200 is obviously one that's well known. We may also want to validate things like 404 statuses that for web routes that are unknown, that sort of thing. So we can, of course, do that. And I think what we'll do is we'll have a look at that a little bit later on, maybe looking at a 404 response code for a failed one.
Okay.
Okay, brilliant. We could take a very quick look at one now, maybe, or maybe let's do that as part of the REST section
Okay.
rather than the GraphQL, because I know one that will give us a 404.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we can look at it there as well.
Excellent. Okay, so I think, have you got any other questions on GraphQL, or should we move on and take a look at REST now?
I think this is good. I also need to explore this much as well. So question will generate later on, I believe. So yeah, this was of
Excellent.
course great. Great stuff.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on now to create a REST test. So we've got a demo API again that we're going to use, which is recres.in. And in there we can do the standard kind of REST activity that you'd expect us to be able to do. So if I just show you what's returned, it's a series of users. Hopefully your viewers can see that, with email address, first name, last name, that sort of stuff, and an avatar that's returned, an image. And what we can do is we can do standard operations. So we can get, we can do a post, patch, and we'll look at post, patch, and put today, and the responses that we get back from that particular API. But we'll start in a straightforward fashion, and we'll do a simple get for one of these users. So in this case, let's pick row 3, which is Emma Wong. So we'll go off and write a test to pull her information down and do some validation on that for a REST activity. So let's create REST test 1. Save that, go in, getting started, again, an API test wrapper. So if we go to web services, we've now got a different wrapper from GraphQL, and this is a REST call. So we'll drag that one in. And again, same sort of thing. For this particular call, we want to add the method that we're going to use. So by default, we do, I believe it's a post call, but here is where we can select the different methods that we want to use. So we'll do a get in this case. We'll drag in the URI. And hopefully we had that. Yep, so there it is. But in this case, we're going to just validate user 3 on this. So we're going to return 1 user. And if we drag in our get response, and we can save that and run it. So there's green light again. We've got our request. In this case, we get shown what method it is, defaults to JSON. These are the headers that we get added automatically. And then we can see what's returned, the response headers and the response body. And there's Emma. And we want to do some validation. Let's pick, say, her first name and her surname in this case. So again, validation, exactly the same as with the GraphQL. We'll drag in an equals, and we're going to do 2 of those. And we'll use the extract value. In this case, we'll extract the key values of data dot first name. Duplicate that, and we'll do her last name. So these are these 2 values here, and we can say, okay, well, that's Emma Wong. And why not do a validation on her on the response code as well? Let's just do that.
Okay.
So again, we go back to our web services, and our response status code is 200. Right, so there we've set up a REST call. We've added a method of get. This is the URL that we're using. We can also parameterize this, and maybe we'll look at parameterization later on. Get response and assert the return values. So let's save that, run it. Aha, what have we got? So let's look at our response that's come back. Oh, I know what we've got to do. So as with all good demos, I've said extract the data, but I've not told it where to extract it from.
Oh, even I was
So...
not able to tell you that. I was so busy in still looking at the validation, like I like the validation part. So I was just deep diving into that only. Forgot that.
Okay, yeah, apologies, I overlooked to do that. So that's what I wanted to do, though, was actually extract our value from the response body that's come back. So if we run that once more, there we go. And there is the assertions and the three values that are being validated there, including the response code.
Great.
So simple REST request and some validation steps for that. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so let's do a post where we're actually going to post some body information now to this. So let's duplicate this one. So we've got the structure of the test ready for us to go. We'll go back to our list and we'll clone that one. And just call that REST do. Go back in and edit that. So in this case, we're going to change this now to a post. And we're going to post a new user, let's say, to this particular API. So we'll go back to the base API, which is just the users one. And we now want to add body content to what we're posting. Okay,
right.
So let's go into our web services and we'll say we want to add body content to that. We'll put in a multi-line input value so we can see what that content looks like. And again, I've got a example here of any fans of the Matrix out there. We've got Morpheus as our leader. So we're going to add him to the API and we'll validate the response that comes back. Excellent. Okay, so we've got the get response block in there already. What we'll do is we'll get rid of these and we'll keep the response code there as well. But we should get a slightly different response code from this. I think, is it 201 or 203? Let's run and find out. Okay, so yeah, so it was a 201, and you can see here that it's telling us that, yeah, we've got one where we didn't see a 0 there. So we can change that to our expected 201 code. Let's take a look at the response that was returned. So we go up here, we'll see that it returns a unique ID, and it also returns a created at timestamp. So just for as a quick way of doing this, what we can do is we can check that the response contains, let's say, 2021 for this particular argument. We have got mechanisms for creating a expected timestamp and masking out information using regular expressions, that sort of thing. But I don't want to spend too long on that today for the focus of API testing. So let's duplicate that. Actually, no, let's use a slightly different assertion in this case. So apologies. We use a contains value. So we'll say, does the response body contain the text 2021? You know, to look at this timestamp here and validate the content of that. So if we run that, we've now validated response code 201 and the value 2021 there, and we can see that that's shown as a passed test.
Wow.
So that's our post covered. What we can do, which I think we cover a little bit later on, is we can also parameterize this body content. So what we've got here is some examples of sort of fixed content within the body that's being presented here. But we may choose to add this data from a different source, for example. So in this case, we can use a format of parameterization. which is to put a variable in place of where we want to have our data presented. So in this case, if we put in a variable called my name here, we can then set that up using another process. So we can also pass it as a script parameter. We can make another API call to get that value, extract it from the response that's returned, and then use it as input into a further process. So that parameter can be, it's quite a powerful technique, this. It can be used to manipulate the body content that you're posting to your API in some clever ways. So let's do a quick example of that. Hopefully, if we use the variable section, and we're going to go up here and say, okay, well, let's save my name here. So remember that this will now be the value will be added to the body because of this structure here. And we'll use our faker data generation, and we will generate a first name in this case. Okay, so this is just going to generate a random first name, save it into my name, and then it's going to add that in where it sees this structure here. So let's run that. And if we go in and have a look at our request, we can see that this name has been generated, Sigrid. It's been added to the body in the right place, and we've got our 201 response back as well. So we can also go through the process of parameterizing our body content in XML or in JSON as well. And I think that's quite a powerful combination there.
Wow. Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so that was our post. The process is very similar for both patch and put. So essentially what we would do here is change this. Let's duplicate this test so we can run them all in sequence at the end. So we'll clone that one. And this is REST 3. And we'll go in here and say, okay, well, in this particular instance, we'll do a patch, and we'll generate a new first name for that. It's actually the same body content in this case, but let's just take out that one section. So we've not put in all the information, but we've just updated the name with a new name. So this is kind of patch process. We'll run that. I may have made some error in the API structure there. Actually, yep. So it's sorry, it's our response in this case. So what we've got back is a 200. So that's
I could not see the
code
response.
knowledge.
I could not see the. Okay, it's coming to me. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the response that came back was a 200 rather than a created, and in this case we were still expecting a 201, so we actually wanted the 200 in this case. So that's where that one failed. But that's my knowledge of response codes. So if we change it to 200, rerun, we should see a pass. Likewise, same thing with a put. Just change the method in there, and we can rerun, and we get the same response back, 200. In this case, we've done a put against that particular API with a new name of June in this case.
So it's quite easy to. Yeah, all the methods can be seen in the request, whatever it is. For example, get, put, post, everything can be visible there. Yeah,
everything's shown in this request section, as well as sort of expected response types and that sort of thing.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So that's covered pretty much what I wanted to cover on the REST side. So some different operations against a particular example URI, posting some body content, getting some user information, validating the content that was returned from the response body, and also showing some examples of parameterizing our body payload that we're sending to our API.
Mhm.
So I think the next topic we were thinking of covering here was going to be authentication.
Okay.
So obviously these are very simple APIs,
Mhm.
and I wanted to go through an authentication process. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our own API for this. So Scriptworks has an API.
Mhm.
We can authenticate using that API, and we get returned a token as part of that response.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a two-stage process. We're going to authenticate, we get a token back, and then we're going to use that token to call our API for a number of further requests, because that token has a lifetime associated with it.
Mhm.
So in order to do this, it's a little bit more complex, but it's essentially just creating two separate calls.
Mhm.
So we'll go back in here, we'll create a new test, and we'll just call it auth1.
Mhm.
And in this one, again, API testing, we're going to use two separate REST calls, though, in this case. The first one will be against our API to get our token, authenticate. And then the second one will be to use the token that we've returned as part of that process. Okay, so in the REST call, we'll do a post. So the method in this case is a post, and it's against our URI. So we're going to put in the URI, and we're going to put in the body content, which will contain a username and a password. Okay, and we also need to send a header with this as well. So we've got our header block here, and we can add a header to that. In this case, we need content type, and we want to put in application JSON for our content type. The URL we've got to add, so we're going to go off and look at our auth URL. And the payload that we want to send is a username and password structure. Now, rather than put in my username and password here, we're gonna we've already added them as secret script parameters, so so they're not displayed in this. So what we want to do is use the variables, and we want to set up two variables here. The username and password field, and we're passing those in as script parameters. So this is secret user, and this is secret password. So this is important technique, because obviously we don't want necessarily these things being displayed in this particular case.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah. So let's get the response, and we should be able to see that. And we'll leave this one off for the moment, so we can just see that this process is performed correctly. Right, so that's our call to our authentication API. What I'm going to do, so it makes it a little bit more readable here, is I'm going to wrap that in a nice comment block and say get auth token. Okay, so that just basically helps us to delineate the sections of our test in this case. If we look at this, we can look at our response. We got a 200 OK, and we got a token returned. And we're going to now use that token to authenticate against the next step, the next API call that we make. Okay, so same sort of thing. We'll actually duplicate this one, speed things up, and we're going to make a get against our API, but we're actually going to go and pull out a project. So the content of one of our projects, and all our projects have names, descriptions, that kind of thing. So we've got a project number that I'll use, and we will we don't need a body for a get, so we'll get rid of that. Content type is the same, except we now need a new header type. We need an authorization header. So let's put in our header, and the value is authorization. So what we want to do now is we want to take our token, but with our token, we've actually got to combine the value with the to create a valid header in this particular case. We've got to combine the authentication type, which is JWT, with the token value that we get back. So what I'm going to do is extract the token from the body content using the same sort of technique we used before, and save it in a variable. So we're going to say save the value as, in this case, token. We'll use the extract key again, and it's actually token is the value in this case, and the response body, if we go back in here, say response body, and in this case we're now going to combine it. So we have a capability here as well, and there's lots of little things like this throughout Scriptworks of how to combine strings together. So we'll combine that value with a text value, and this is going to concatenate those two values together. And what we see there is our token combined with JWT, which is the authentication type, to create this token. Let's call this token header, or auth header is actually probably better in this instance.
Right.
And we'll go back in here and we'll use the value that we've created, which is this one, and we'll pop it on there and say, let's use auth header as our value for that particular header type. Okay, get response, and then we'll run those back to back. Just make it look a little bit nicer. So this is our API call with token, and we'll run those. So that looked successful. So we've got our first post to the auth API, and we got our response back, and then we've got our second post to the project API. So if we have a look here, we can see now that we've got our response body authenticated. Our headers are up here in the request. So we'll have a look at the request, and you'll see that we've got that authorization header with JWT and our token value that we got.
Right.
In the response, we've got my name, title, I created the project, and description and various other things there as well. So essentially what we've done there is we can then validate content of that as well. Again, same sort of process. We use an assertion, and we can say, let's extract. I'm just going to copy that one and say extract title. So the title of that particular project, and we'll do a comparison to say, is it API test, which is that what it is, it should be. Run that through. And last step we should see in the log here is the validation step to check that that was what was returned. We course support other types of authorization headers, so your basic authentication using username and password, auth2, all of that kind of stuff, which tokenize responses, pretty much anything that you can pass through as a header, you can do through this kind of mechanism. But yeah, I thought it'd be a good example to show an authenticated API, and in fact our own API in this instance.
Awesome, great stuff, Duncan.
Excellent. Okay. Also, one other thing that we like to do in terms of testing APIs is provide some lots of data permutations and combinations. So to run through similar test processes with varying data. So I thought it would be a really nice little thing to show here of using a data source, looping through that data source and running a request multiple times against an API for each of the rows within that data source. So I thought for a bit of fun, what we'd do is we'd use a new feature of the product that we added recently, which is to use Google Sheets as our data source. So a lot of tools will support CSV, XLSX, all of that stuff Scriptworks supports. But I thought we'd show one live on Google Sheets, and we'll use that as our data source, and we'll iterate through this running a REST request for each row within that data source. Okay, so should we go about doing that?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Excellent.
Okay. To see, yeah.
All right, so what we do, new test. We'll call this data-driven test 1, because that's kind of what it is. And we'll go through to, again, getting started, same process, API test. And for this one, though, we're going to use a data source. So here's our data sources. We've got lots of options: file system, remote files from URLs, or a Google Sheet, which is the one we're going to use in this particular instance. So we'll drag that in. Now we've got the sheet ID. So the sheet ID is basically, whoops, we go to our, have I still got that open? Yep, I have here. The sheet ID is the value that you see here. So if we select this value and we pop it in here where it says ID, that's our Google Sheet ID. So it's going to open that, and there's some operations in the background which will go in and open that particular sheet. It needs to be made available. So this is from a shared link. Within that, we'll use the books worksheet, and we're going to give it a name. So let's say books, and we'll say this is my data source. So we assign each data source a name. So we can actually have multiple data sources open at once. We could open lots of these.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay. We're then going to say, let's iterate over that data source. So for each row in my data, we're going to run a web service call. So we're going to do a REST call in this instance, and we're going to use a post method. So we'll choose post method, and we're going to use a URI. So the URI in this case is another web service, which is one that we use for it's a example one with a kind of book information on, and you can post sorry, not book information, post information. So it's like a forum site. We need a header content for that one as well. So we'll add in content type. In this case, it's JSON, but it needs a char set. So we've got here a header that we want to pass through. And we also need to add our body content as well, obviously. So let's put in our body. And in here, again, we'll grab in a input value, in this case, multi-line. And we're going to use a parameterized body again. So in here is our payload. In this case, it's parameterized in the same technique that we used before, where we use placeholder values, and we're going to fill those values with the information that we get from that Google Sheet. So in our Google Sheet again, we've got a title and some body information here. So we're going to get that title and that one. So let's just add one in here. So STET talk demo content like that. Okay, so that's saving that, save to the drive. So we know that that's ready to go. Trevor keeps popping up. So let's, in order to use that though, we're going to have to assign these values, the values from our Google Sheet. And we do that quite simply by, similar to what we did before, we said 2 values, title and body, except that this time we're pulling them from the data source. So we go back to our data source section and we're going to say value of field. In this case, they are the same, and we'll pull those from my data.
Okay.
Likewise again, body from my data.
Yeah.
So we'll save that. And when we run that, it should run 5 separate requests. Is it 5? I think so. And we should see those hopefully go through. I may have missed, oh, I've missed one step. I forgot to get our response back. So as part of the web services block, we always need to add the get response so that it'll actually run and return the response. So that's passed. We go back and look at our values. We can see now that we've got, starting at row 2, because the first row was our headers, row 3, row 4, row 5, etc. And the final one in our request was STET talk demo content, and that was the request that we put through, and the response came back just to say it's created that particular information. So again, very simply, in a matter of a few minutes there, we've opened a Google Sheet, iterated over that, and made multiple post requests for all the content of that.
Yeah, that's what actually I'm looking at, like how sooner we can do these stuffs by using Scriptworks. Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's great. We've built in a lot of powerful functionality, and as we'll see later on, just as the last thing we're going to do is run a like we have here. We're going to run a REST call. Actually, no, we're going to run a GraphQL call, pull out a country, capital city, and then we're going to open a website, and we're going to use the web testing capabilities to interact with that website and give us the weather in that particular capital city. So that'll be our kind of finale, if you like. I think what we'd like to cover next, so very quickly, is SOAP, isn't it? Obviously, there's still a lot of SOAP APIs out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely, very similar. We'll save that one, go back in and create a new test. In this case, we'll do SOAP 1 and our description. Save that. Similar process, getting started, API test, and then web services, SOAP call. And for this, SOAP call is obviously quite a specific set of requirements for a SOAP call. And the first ones are, we need obviously our URI, and then we need a body. So SOAP always needs an XML body structure, which contains the information for that particular call. And then last but not least, what I forgot earlier was the response. So the important thing here, we need a URI to test against, and we need some body content for that. So I've pre-prepared some content here. We're going to use the country info service, which is a SOAP demo website, and we're going to pop the URL in here. The way that SOAP web services work, you can pass in a SOAP action, or sometimes the body tells informs the SOAP web service about what action is being performed. In this case, it's in the body content. So here's our SOAP envelope, and what I'll do is add in multi-line fields so we can see that SOAP envelope in full. and we're passing in this case, the country information for a particular capital city, and we're going to pass in AT as our ISO code. So we should get back as part of that Vienna, and this SOAP web service will return XML. So we're going to have a look at how we specify an XPath to validate that XML as well.
Looking at intended body is actually a great thing. Like I have seen in this multi-line block, it's awesome. I can see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
it gives a good way of being able to manipulate that XML and parameterize it and things as well. But then when we don't need to see it all, we can get rid of it, and it's tucked away in that block content.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so let's run that. And yep, we've got a pass, which is great. We'll go again, drop down into here, look at the response, and you can see the call type. Again, in our request, just it's returning text, in this case text XML. It was a 200 OK status code, and this was the response body with our SOAP envelope that we've returned. So we now want to drill down into this and pick out the capital city value. There's obviously things like namespaces and stuff on here as well. We can support namespaces. What I'm going to do is show you a nice little trick in XPath where we don't actually need to specify all the namespaces in order to pull that out. Okay, so we'll do an assertion again. And we'll say assert the value of, and we've got an XML block here, which is an XPath query for dealing with XML. And we want to connect that to our response body. So we're saying extract XPath value from that response body. So I've got an XPath that I've put together, or have I? Yes, I have. Here it is. So this XPath here is basically a way of saying, in XPath terms, any node where the local name is equal to capital city result. So it essentially we don't need to specify the namespaces for that. We can just put local name here, and we want the text value from that node that's returned. So it will extract using that XPath the value, and then hopefully from here we can say Vienna. We save that, run that through, and we've got a pass in this case. So it's showing us that it's extracted that node text, and we can validate the exact content of that.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's SOAP. You know, we support 3 basic GraphQL REST and SOAP APIs at present.
Well, that's awesome.
I think we were going to wrap up. What I won't do is go through all the motions of putting together a full integrated web and REST test. But what I'll do is I'll just show you what that looks like, and we can run it and see how that operates. Okay. So this is one that we prepared. I'll show you the app that we're actually going to use, the web app. So we're going to use Trevor Blade's countries again. We're going to pull out the capital city of Australia, which I tested you on earlier. And we're going to use that capital city value, and we're going to input it later into a search box. So you can see here, this is our GraphQL call. We go to the URI, we run a GraphQL query, get the response, extract the capital from that response, and save it. Then we're going to navigate to a web app, log into it using a user ID and a secret password, go through and click on the Add City link. Now, the JavaScript code that runs in the background of Scriptworks runs very quickly. So I've added 2 wait statements here, so we can see the value being typed in, and then the process will continue to add it to our weather app. Before I do that, we'll just very quickly show you the weather app itself. So this is our search box. We can put in some search terms, so whatever we want to do in this particular instance, and when you add it, it will display the weather in this section here. So it's a nice simple weather app, and we should be able to see the weather in Canberra today.
Mhm.
So let's switch back in, and we'll run that against Chrome. And what we should do is see Chrome appear, login process take place. There's a little wait, it enters Canberra, clicks on that, and then logs out of the app. And if we switch back to our test, okay, we have got a fail for some reason. Let's have a look why. Okay, so the last section there where it was clicking on home, for some reason it was running a little bit slowly, but we've got a thing here to tell us that. The key thing, you can run this again in a second, is that the request was done, response was returned with our capital city, and then we entered Canberra into the search box and hit enter. So essentially we've combined there the combination of a GraphQL call with some web testing activity to combine those two things. And I don't think there's a lot of tools out there that, certainly from the API testing point of view, that can do those two things together.
Wow, but I'm looking at it first time. I feel, I've never seen like combining web, web and the API both. Oh, it's a great learning for me as well. Wow.
Excellent, cool. Yeah, so obviously, just to go a little bit beyond that, Scriptworks also supports mobile device testing. So we can also interact with iOS and Android devices, as well as web browsers on mobile devices as well. So you could, in theory, use the API testing with web testing alongside the mobile testing as well. So cover all of the different endpoints that you've got in your application landscape.
Wow.
So one last thing I wanted to do was just to go back into this session and all the tests that we've created here. So look, over this last session, we've described and created quite a number of tests there, was to select them all and run them all in parallel. So just to show you that what we're doing with our API, we can fire all of our tests in parallel at multiple endpoints, and you can see the responses coming back in from all of those SOAP and REST and GraphQL endpoints. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Mind blowing.
Excellent. So great. Well, I've covered all the content that I wanted to show today. Be really interested to see if we get lots of questions from this. But no, I'm very pleased again to be back on the STET series, and thanks again for having me, Ajay.
Wow, thank you for coming up and show this remarkable tool with its remarkable capabilities and great stuff. So I would say this was a remarkable session on automating APIs using Scriptworks, visual programming, a low-code automation tool. Thanks, Duncan, for showing various examples of API automation using Scriptworks and make us feel that doing API automation really easy when right kind of tool has been used. Simply superb. I would like to say thank you for coming over STET and sharing remarkable capabilities again. And looking at this innovative tool, I feel there would be a lot of things coming in the way, and we would like you to come up again and display new innovative ideas which you are implementing on Scriptworks on STET.
Absolutely, we'd love to. That would be great. And again, thank you for having us on STET.
Thank you, Duncan, and thanks for your time. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Ajay. Great to speak again. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.